strAInge. Welcome to the strAInge.
Chapter 1. The Tragedy of Peg Entwistle. Imagine it is a late Friday night in September of 1932. The air in Los Angeles is thick with a heavy coastal fog that rolls over the Santa Monica Mountains like a cold white shroud. High above the valley, glowing with the light of 4,000 individual bulbs, stands a massive wooden advertisement that defines the ambition of the age, Hollywoodland. It was not a monument yet, it was a real estate sign, a temporary structure built of wood and sheet metal. But for one young woman climbing the steep, sun-scorched dirt of Mount Lee that night, it represented the edge of the world. Welcome to the beginning of our journey into the most famous haunting in the City of Angels. To understand the ghost, we have to understand the girl, and we have to understand the industry that beckoned her across an ocean. Her name was Millicent Lillian Entwistle, though the world would come to know her as Peg. Born in Port Talbot, Wales, in 1908, Peg was never just another starstruck girl stepping off a bus with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. She was a professional. She was a legitimate talent, a veteran of the Broadway stage who had already tasted the kind of success most actors spend a lifetime chasing. In fact, she was so compelling on stage that a young, then unknown Betty Davis once sat in the audience, watched Peg perform, and turned to her mother to say that she wanted to be exactly like Peg Entwistle. She landed a role in a psychological thriller called 13 Women, produced by RKO Studios. This was meant to be the big break, the moment when the Hollywoodland sign ceased to be a distant landmark and started to mean home. Hollywood during the Great Depression was a meat grinder that didn't care for Broadway pedigree. When the final cut of 13 Women was screened, Peg discovered that her performance had been hacked away, reduced to a few inconsequential moments on screen. The studio didn't renew her contract. The roles she had been promised vanished into the humid California air. The pressure of supporting her family and maintaining the facade of a rising star began to fracture. On that Friday night, September 16th, Peg told her uncle she was walking down to the local drugstore to see some friends. She didn't go to the store. Instead, she trekked through the rugged, unpaved terrain of Griffith Park, heading up toward the glowing summit of Mount Lee. We can only speculate on what was going through her mind as she reached the base of the sign. At the time, each letter stood 50 feet tall and was anchored into the hillside with a complex web of scaffolding and ladders. Peg took off her coat, folded it neatly, and placed her purse on top of it. Inside that purse was a short, devastating note that read, "I am afraid, I am a coward. I am sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain." She then began the climb. She scaled the workman's ladder behind the letter H, step by agonizing step, until she reached the very top. From that height, the lights of Los Angeles must have looked like a sea of diamonds, a cruel, shimmering reminder of the glamour that had turned its back on her. Then, she stepped off into the void. Peg's body wasn't found for 2 days. A hiker eventually discovered her coat, her purse, and her suicide note, but couldn't bring herself to look down into the ravine. She took the items to the police station and left them there anonymously. Because Peg had no identification on her, she was initially processed as a Jane Doe. It wasn't until her uncle identified her remains that the city realized the Hollywoodland girl was one of their own. But the detail that cements this as the ultimate Hollywood tragedy came 24 hours later. A letter arrived at her home from the Beverly Hills Playhouse. They were offering her the lead role in a new production, a play about a woman driven to the edge who eventually takes her own life. Peg died believing she was a failure, never knowing that the very opportunity she craved was sitting in a mailbox a few miles away. The physical story of Peg Entwistle ended in a crematorium, her ashes eventually returned to a family plot in Ohio. But the spiritual story was just beginning. Almost immediately after her death, the legends started to take root in the dry soil of the canyon. It wasn't just that people saw a woman in 1930s clothing, it was the way they saw her. They described a blonde figure wandering the trails near the sign, always looking dazed, always heading toward the letter H. But the most chilling detail wasn't visual. It was a scent. Witnesses throughout the decades, from park rangers to casual hikers, have reported a sudden, overwhelming aroma of gardenias, Peg's favorite perfume, drifting through the air on days when there wasn't a flower for miles. It is as if the mountain itself has recorded her final walk, playing it back like a tragic loop of film that refuses to end. Chapter 2: The First Sightings. The death of Peg Entwistle was a headline for a week and a tragedy for a month, but as the 1930s drew to a close, the city of Los Angeles seemed ready to move on. The Great Depression was tightening its grip, and the Hollywoodland sign itself was beginning to reflect the rot of the era. The bulbs were burning out, the wood was splintering, and the massive letter L eventually tumbled down the hillside. It was a skeletal, decaying monument to a dream that had soured. But while the public moved on, the mountain did not. Griffith Park is a vast, wild expanse, over 4,000 acres of deep canyons and rugged peaks that feel ancient and indifferent to the neon glow of the city below. It is a place that holds on to its echoes. The first reports of something strange didn't come from ghost hunters or thrill seekers. They came from the men who lived and worked on the mountain, the park rangers. In the late 1930s, rangers on night patrol began reporting a recurring sight that defied logic. They described a blonde woman in a white, 1930s-style tea dress wandering the restricted trails directly beneath the sign. When they would call out to her, she wouldn't run or hide. She would simply walk toward the base of the letter H and vanish into the shadows. When the rangers reached the spot where she had been standing, they found nothing, no footprints in the soft, dry dirt, no snapped twigs, just a sudden, bone-chilling drop in temperature. Then, there was the scent. This is perhaps the most consistent and famous detail in nearly a century of sightings. It is a heavy, floral sweetness, the unmistakable smell of gardenias, that cuts through the natural aroma of sagebrush and dusty eucalyptus. Gardenias were Peg Entwistle's favorite perfume, the scent she reportedly wore on the night she died. In 1944, a hiker reported being followed by this phantom fragrance for nearly a mile. He described the sensation of being watched by someone deeply, profoundly sad. As he rounded a bend near the summit of Mount Lee, he saw a woman standing on the very edge of the cliff. He shouted for her to get back, fearing a suicide was in progress. She turned to look at him, her face pale and her eyes wide with a look of total disorientation, and then she simply stepped off the ledge. The hiker ran to the edge, expecting to see a body on the rocks below, but there was nothing there. Only the wind. As the decades passed, the sightings became more frequent and more detailed. Witnesses began to describe her hair, set in tight, period-accurate finger waves, and the specific way she walked, with a purposeful, mechanical stride as if she were trapped in a loop. By the 1960s, the lady in the H had become a local legend. One famous account from 1961 involves a group of friends sitting in their car near the trailhead. They reported that the air inside the vehicle suddenly turned so cold their breath misted on the glass. Through the fog, a woman appeared and walked directly past their headlights. One witness claimed that as she passed, she cast no shadow, and the smell of gardenias filled the car so strongly it was almost suffocating. What is it that keeps this image alive? Is it a stone tape recording, an emotional scar left on the landscape by the sheer force of Peg's despair? Or is it something more? Some believe that because Peg died feeling like a failure, her spirit remains tethered to the very symbol of the industry that rejected her. She has become the patron saint of Hollywood's lost souls, a spectral reminder that for every name in lights, there are 1,000 more buried in the shadows of these hills. But as we will see in the next chapter, Peg isn't the only one roaming these peaks. There is a darkness in Griffith Park that predates the Hollywood sign by nearly 70 years, a curse that some say made Peg's tragedy inevitable. Chapter 3: Beyond Peg, Other Spirits of Griffith Park. To truly understand the hauntings of the Hollywood sign, we have to look deeper than the tragic leap of Peg Entwistle. We have to look at the soil beneath the letters. Griffith Park is one of the largest municipal parks in North America, but many believe it is also one of the most cursed. Long before the first film camera arrived in California, this land was at the center of a bitter, supernatural blood feud that some say set the stage for every tragedy that followed. The legend begins in 1863 with a man named Don Antonio Feliz, the wealthy owner of the Rancho Los Feliz. As he lay dying of smallpox, his greedy lawyer and a friend allegedly manipulated him into signing over his vast estate, disinheriting his young niece, Dona Petronilla. When Petronilla learned she had been cheated out of her birthright, she didn't just walk away. She stood before the new owners and delivered a bone-chilling curse. She swore that the land would bring nothing but death and misfortune to anyone who tried to profit from it. She cursed the cattle, the crops, and most importantly, the people. Skeptics might point to coincidence, but the history of the land tells a different story. The first man to take over the ranch after the curse was killed in a freak accident. The next owner watched as his cattle died of mysterious diseases and his crops were leveled by unprecedented storms. Even Griffith J. Griffith, the man who eventually donated the land to the city and for whom the park is named, was not immune. Despite his philanthropic reputation, he was a deeply troubled man who eventually served time in San Quentin for the attempted murder of his wife. Many locals whispered that the Feliz curse had finally caught up with him. It is within this cursed environment that the Hollywood sign was erected in 1923. While Peg Entwistle is the most famous spirit associated with the sign, she is far from the only one. Hikers and park rangers have long reported a figure known as the Watcher, a tall, shadow-like entity that stands on the ridges overlooking the letters. Unlike the sorrowful, floral-scented presence of Peg, the Watcher is described as cold and imposing. Some believe it is the spirit of Don Antonio Feliz himself, forever patrolling the borders of the land he lost. Then there is the story of John Knight. In the early 2000s, a man's remains were found in the rugged brush just a few hundred yards from the sign. He had sought solitude in the hills, but his death left a lingering energy. Hikers in the Beechwood Canyon area often report hearing the sound of heavy boots crunching on dry leaves when no one else is around. Some have even reported seeing a man in modern hiking gear who looks perfectly normal until he turns a corner and vanishes into a cliffside that no human could possibly scale. Even the modern security measures around the sign, the high-tech thermal cameras and motion sensors, occasionally pick up things they shouldn't. Security teams have reported false alarms where the thermal imaging shows a heat signature of a human figure standing directly under the letter H. When the helicopters arrive or the rangers reach the spot, the sensors show the figure is still there, yet the physical space is empty. Is it possible that the Hollywood sign acts as a sort of lightning rod for the restless? The combination of the ancient Feliz curse and the modern city of broken dreams creates a unique kind of haunting. It's a place where the barrier between our world and the next seems dangerously thin. In our next chapter, we'll look at the most famous modern encounters, the people who went looking for a photo and found something that changed their lives forever. Chapter 4: Modern Encounters and Pop Culture. As the 20th century bled into the 21st, the Hollywood sign transformed from a crumbling real estate advertisement into a global icon. With that fame came a new generation of seekers, hikers, tourists, and influencers, all drawn to the summit of Mount Lee. But the high-tech security fences and thermal cameras that now surround the letters haven't stopped the sightings. If anything, the modern era has provided some of the most chilling and well-documented encounters with the ghost of the Hollywood sign. One of the most famous modern accounts occurred in the 1990s. A couple was hiking the rugged trails behind the sign just as the sun began to set. They were well within the legal boundaries, but they noticed a woman in a white dress walking on a restricted ledge directly above them. Thinking she was a fellow hiker who had lost her way or was in danger of falling, they shouted up to her. The woman didn't respond. She walked with a strange, dazed gait, her eyes fixed on something they couldn't see. As they watched, she stepped behind the letter L and simply never came out the other side. There was nowhere for her to go but a sheer drop. Yet the trail remained empty. The couple reported an overwhelming scent of gardenias that lingered in the air long after she vanished. This modern reenactment of Peg's final walk has become a staple of Los Angeles lore. It has permeated pop culture in ways that Peg Entwistle could have never imagined during her short life. Musicians and filmmakers have found a dark inspiration in her tragedy. Lana Del Rey's Lust for Life music video famously features the singer dancing on top of the H, a direct, ethereal nod to the girl who jumped. The story has been retold in television shows like American Horror Story and in countless documentaries, each one adding a new layer to the mythos. Peg has become the patron saint of the Hollywood death trope, the beautiful girl destroyed by the very machine she sought to join. But why does this story persist so strongly in our digital age? Some paranormal researchers suggest that the Hollywood sign acts as a stone tape. This theory proposes that minerals in the mountain's rock, like quartz or magnetite, can record high-energy emotional events, playing them back like a loop of film when the atmospheric conditions are just right. The sheer desperation and sorrow Peg felt on that September night in 1932 may have been so intense that it left a permanent scar on the landscape. Others believe the haunting is a manifestation of our collective psyche. Hollywood is a city built on illusions and broken dreams. The ghost of the sign isn't just Peg, she is a symbol for everyone who ever came to this city with a dream and left with nothing. She is the shadow of the industry, a reminder that the glitz and glamour have a very real, very human cost. Even the skeptics struggle to explain the gardenia phenomenon. How do dozens of unrelated people, decades apart, all report the same specific floral scent in a dry, scrub-filled canyon? As we move into our final chapter, we will look at the legacy of the sign itself. We'll explore how a simple wooden advertisement became a totem for the human spirit, and why, as long as the letters stand on the hill, the ghost of the Hollywood sign will likely never truly leave. Chapter 5. The Final Word: Legacy of the Sign. As we reach the summit of our journey, we have to ask ourselves, what is it about 9 giant white letters on a dusty hillside that commands so much of our collective imagination? The Hollywood sign has evolved from a temporary real estate advertisement into a global totem, a symbol of ambition, glamour, and, as we've seen, profound tragedy. It is perhaps the only landmark in the world that represents both the pinnacle of human achievement and the absolute depth of human despair. For nearly a century, the spirit of Peg Entwistle has remained the silent guardian of this dichotomy. She is the girl in the white dress, the phantom of the H, and the scent of gardenias on a dry canyon breeze. But her legacy is more than just a ghost story. Peg has become a cautionary tale for the ages, a reminder that the dream of Hollywood is often built on a foundation of very real, very fragile lives. In a city that thrives on the new, the shiny, and the next big thing, Peg is the one thing that refuses to be forgotten. She is the shadow that the spotlights can't quite erase. Some say that as long as the sign stands, the haunting will continue. There is something about the geometry of the letters and the rugged, unyielding nature of Mount Lee that seems to trap energy. Whether you believe in sentient spirits or simply in the power of a tragic history to leave a mark on a place, there is no denying the atmosphere of the Hollywood sign at dusk. When the tourists head back down to the safety of the city and the fog begins to roll over the ridge, the air changes. The modern world feels distant, and the 1930s feel very, very close. Today, the sign is protected by a fortress of technology, infrared sensors, razor wire, and 24-hour surveillance. Yet, the reports keep coming in. Every few years, a new hiker or a security guard catches a glimpse of a blonde woman wandering where no living person should be. She doesn't trigger the alarms. She doesn't leave a heat signature on the thermal cameras. She simply exists in the periphery of our vision, a permanent resident of the city of broken dreams. As we close the book on the ghosts of the Hollywood sign, we realize that the mountain isn't just haunted by Peg, but by the hopes of everyone who ever looked up at those letters and saw a future that wasn't meant to be. The sign isn't just a landmark, it's a monument to the human spirit's need to be seen, to be remembered, and to belong. Peg Entwistle may have left this world in a moment of darkness, but in doing so, she became an eternal part of the Hollywood light. Thank you for joining us on this trek through the shadows of Mount Lee. We hope you'll carry the scent of those phantom gardenias with you, at least until our next journey. Be sure to join us for our next episode, where we'll descend from the hills and step into the velvet-lined darkness of the city's most legendary stages. We'll be exploring the haunted theaters of Hollywood, from the phantom projectionists of the Chinese theater to the restless stars who still refuse to take their final bow at the Pantages. Until then, keep your eyes on the hills, and watch your step in the fog.
Oh, yeah. strange.